everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. Raffi, joined by Davian. Davian, we are inching closer and closer to the start of the NFL season, and with that, now's a really good time for us to take a look at some players that we think might be potential breakout candidates. But before we do that, and as is customary on this podcast, Davian, how are things? How are you? Yeah, how is everything?
I'm good. Today I start off with a peace sign instead of a little salute because I think this is going to be a great podcast. And I think, we have I think last week was really wholesome. We talked about all of our favorite memories. And I think today will be maybe a bit more contentious as we discuss, players who we think are going to break out and who we think might be absolute busts. In any case, though, I've been good. The Patriots played their first preseason game last night against the Commanders. Travion Henderson, our newly drafted running back, had a kickoff return for a touchdown on the first time he touched the football basically in any NFL game, which I was pretty happy to see. Shedeur Sanders looked pretty good. Jalen Milroe for the Seahawks looked pretty solid for a rookie quarterback. I'm just excited to see what happens, in these next few days as more preseason games occur. Of course, there's been a lot of injuries, and we send out all of our prayers to all those NFL players who are dealing with those injuries. We could go through all list of all of them, but we would be here for too long almost mentioning them. In any case, it's definitely something to discuss at some point, Rafi. How do we prevent injuries, especially in the preseason? Because we want starters to be playing in the preseason. That's why the preseason was shortened from 4 weeks to 3 weeks. But at the same time, nobody wants to see a starter or any player for that hand go down in a basically meaningless game except for the rookies trying to prove themselves.
Yeah, and you guys had a weird territory of the easiest way would be not playing football, but then you see people get injured just in training drills, etc., which are important because you need to be doing those training drills in order to get yourself up to speed for the upcoming season. So I don't think that we're ever going to get to a point where these injuries are just going to cease to exist. Unfortunately, football is a contact sport, and when you have a contact sport, you're going to wind up with injuries, even in practices, which is just the unfortunate reality. Rashawn Slater, probably one of the biggest injuries so far that we've heard about recently. Offensive lineman for the Chargers, normally plays tackle, protecting Justin Herbert on the left side. He's out for the entire season, so already a really big loss for the Chargers, and that is surely going to be something that really impacts my predictions about where I'm going to have the Chargers finishing. Herbert's going to be healthy this year, hopefully knock on wood, entering the season, which will be different than last year, but that's a massive injury for them right off the bat. They do have Joe Alt, who could potentially step in, and maybe he's going to be that guy instantly at left tackle, but you lose Rashawn Slater, your top guy who you just paid a lot of money to. It's just really unfortunate. And again, I think it's an unfortunate reality that we live in where we're never going to be able to just cease all these pre-regular season injuries. It's just the unfortunate reality of playing a contact sport. We see it with hockey too.
Yeah, you really do. And I think one thing also to add is that you have, the biggest injury was last night, Maurice Norris in the Falcons-Lions preseason game. And I'm kind of happy that, the NFL took the side of, ending the game early because at that point there was just, so much going on. And for a preseason game, there's just no reason to continue really with all the players so mentally shaken up after such a horrific injury. Luckily, for an update for all the viewers, Maurice Norris is now stable in the hospital. Apparently he was speaking last night and had some sort of movement. So, prayers out to him for a speedy recovery. In case, Rafi, let's get into it. Well, who are your top 5 players or top 3? Or who do you think is your favorite player right now to have a breakout season in the NFL?
All right, so we'll just dive right into the full-blown Chicagoism of the podcast. And it's actually kind of funny that I'm the one who's going to be bringing up this guy because if you look at the history of the podcast, I am the native Chicagoan here. But Davian, out of us and then when Theodore was on the podcast, was the big guy banging the drum for the Chicago Bears the past couple of years. Infamously, I believe it was last year, you had the Bears in the NFC Championship game, I believe. Was that last year or was that the year before?
I think that was last year, I want to say.
It might have
Yeah,
been last year.
I think that was last year.
Anyways, yeah, Davian's been the bigger Bears supporter than I am, the bigger Bears backer. But
But
when I'm looking at breakout candidates, I feel like the very easy prediction here is Caleb Williams. A lot of Chicagoans are really banking on Caleb Williams to really break out this season. He had certainly some games last year where you saw the potential. He flashed some signs of being one of the top players in the NFL, one of the top QBs, and certainly a top 10 quarterback at some point. And he did have his struggles, his fair share of struggles. Throwing the ball deep down the field was certainly something where he had a little bit of growing pain with. But I do think having a more offensively minded head coach in Ben Johnson, who really was creative with the Detroit Lions offense and really helped develop Jared Goff and take his game to another level last year, I do think that's going to be a really big addition for Caleb Williams' learning and development. The Bears have also really put a big emphasis on upgrading the offensive line this past offseason. Polls added guys like Joe Tooney from Kansas City, Jonah Jackson from Detroit. So the Bears' offensive line, I don't know if it's going to be a top 5 unit, but it should certainly be way better than it was this past year, where it felt like Caleb Williams was constantly on the run, trying to get the ball out of his hand and trying to make superhero plays, which are nice from time to time, but if you keep playing that hero ball constantly, you're going to get burned on it more often than not. So I do have Caleb Williams as a breakout candidate. I do think he's one of the more likely players to break out just because, as mentioned, you have new head coaches more offensively minded, and you upgraded the big issue for him, which was the offensive line.
yeah, of course. I think, going off of that, I think another breakout star on the Bears is Romeo Odunze. Because you have so much protection around Caleb Williams, because the relationship between Williams and Odunze has definitely improved over over these past few months in training camp. I think that you will really see a breakout season from the both of them because I don't see how you can have a Caleb Williams breakout season without a Romeo Adunze breakout season. I feel like the two go hand in hand. Simply because Adunze I think is going to be the top target for Caleb Williams.
100%. You still have DJ Moore on that offense as well, who's going to be one of the more
Yeah, that's another
deeper type
one
of
that
target players.
yeah.
But if you're looking for checkdowns, Roma Dunze is certainly a guy who's definitely speedier and I think would do well in some mesh type of formats as well. Then you also have Luther Burden as well, who's going to be a rookie from Mizzou. Did have some character concerns, but if those character concerns didn't exist, he would definitely be a first round pick in this past NFL draft. So he's another guy to look out for. And yeah, all around you look at the Bears offense and you see a lot of really solid players. Drew Dahlman, another guy who was on the Falcons last year, played solid for the most part. He's been added to for the offensive line. So overall, the Bears made a lot of positive moves to potentially lead them to a winning record, which they haven't had many of late. A guy that I have also as a breakout candidate, similar to you with Roma Dunze, Marvin Harrison, who was the first wide receiver taken in the 2024 NFL
Yeah,
draft.
100%,
And
dude.
he didn't have a bad season necessarily, but 885 yards from the number 2 overall pick for all the hype that he had coming into last season. He's certainly disappointed from those expectations and from the overall hype. I think the big thing for him was just the communication between him and Kyler Murray seemed to not be there at some points. The chemistry wasn't really there. Kyler Murray would be missing him on some routes. He'd be throwing the ball high, he'd be throwing the ball low. It didn't seem like they were very synced up well. And I think now that they're going to have a full offseason, they're now going to be in training camp together again. I think that development is going to only get better between the two. That chemistry is going to get better. And the Cardinals don't have too many other high-profile targets. They do have a tight end who I'm blanking on his name right now. This is not good because he's probably one of the top tight ends in the NFL right now. But anyways, they do have him as a good security blanket. But wide receiver-wise, Marvin Harrison really is the guy. So I do expect now, after the growing pains of year one and the growing pains of development between him and Kyler Murray, I think this year he has a really good chance of taking that next leap and developing some really good chemistry with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Rafi, I had Marvin Harrison Jr. on my list as well. For all those who play fantasy football, I honestly would be really looking out for Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that let's not forget how hyped up of a player he was entering into the NFL. Uh, they thought he was going to be the immediate kind of star for this Cardinals team, and the issue is that he wasn't really able to connect well with Kyler Murray because Well, Kyler Murray wasn't playing well. He didn't have a good line around him. He clearly didn't have a good playbook. And so I think now, with everything getting shaken up and with a brand new offensive line, with more reinforcements around Kyler Murray, the same way there's reinforcements around Caleb Williams, I think we'll see another breakout star. In terms of quarterbacks and breakout stars, I have to say Drake May. I really think that what the Patriots have put together, what I saw yesterday during the preseason game, adding Stephon Diggs, adding a true number one wide receiver for Drake May, adding another key core to the running back core piece to the running back core, I think is huge. Now you have Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson. You have an offensive line which is pretty well put together, not the best, I will say, but I truly think Drake May takes the next step. And with Mike Vrabel at the helm, I really think that the possibilities are limitless. And I think that Vrabel went to the playoffs with Ryan Tannehill. All right, that's all I'm going to say. And I think that there's a very, very strong chance that he could take Drake May and this squad, and being a former Patriot, knowing the Patriot way in and out, I think that the Patriots for themselves are going to have a breakout season. But I think it's specifically Drake May is going to have an amazing season.
I think the Stephon Diggs edition is kind of going under the radar in the sense that his last season ended very abruptly. I believe it was a torn ACL or a torn Achilles.
It was, yep.
The middle of the season, that was the big reason why people might be a little more down on him. He's also, I believe he's 30-ish years old at this point, which for NFL age is when you start to see players start to teeter off a little bit, their production starts to dip. So I can understand why people are a little lower on Stephon Diggs, but I personally am still pretty high on Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs and Marvin Harrison, I've looked at fantasy mock drafts and etc. Both of them are projected to go somewhere between like the 7th to like 8th round. And I'm like, if either of those guys are available in my fantasy league, I'd be more than happy to pick them up at that position. Just because I think they have so much upside. And again, Stephon Diggs has one of the bigger things where it's, and Marvin Harrison as well, where who else is Kyler Murray and Drake May really going to throw the ball to? They have two really good wide receivers who can go up and get the ball, who can produce, and Marvin Harrison has shown flashes of becoming one of the top wide receivers in the NFL. So I like really both of those guys as a whole, especially in the fantasy realm, where both of them are projected to go 7th, 8th round. Moving over to the trenches, Kalijah Kancey, Buccaneers defensive tackle, 19th overall pick in 2023. Ooh. He had a solid second season last year after having a pretty decently productive rookie year. He had 7.5 sacks last year in only 12 games. He missed 8 games over the first 2 seasons, but I think if he's healthy, there's no reason why he can't take that next step into double-digit sack territory. I'm not going to lie, I did not know too much about him before doing some research for this podcast, but overall, his PFF grade went from 40 the first half of the year to almost 60 in the back half. Yes, PFF, we all have our gripes about if it's a really good metric, is it not a good metric, but that's at least a sign that he is getting better and he's continuing to develop. And he also had 29 pressures as a whole in the back half of last season. So this is a guy who has consistently shown good development over the past couple seasons and in breakups of the first half to the second half of last year. And there's no reason in my mind that he can't take the next step to be at least a double-digit sack guy who can certainly get over 40, 50 pressures next season, this upcoming season.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a really wow. Look at you, Raffi. You got ball knowledge. Yeah, I think that's a really great, pick. I think that the Buccaneers, as a team, they're gonna be stepping up more, and especially when you have a good team around you, it helps you break out as a star. And so, I couldn't agree with you more on that one.
I will not be discounting the Bucs this year. Sorry to cut you off, but I will not be discounting the Bucs this year. No. Last year I slept on them. I had the Falcons winning the division, but this year, not to tease too much of my predictions, I will certainly have the Buccaneers winning the NFC South.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I could see the Buccaneers finishing first, but Raffi, I think you're selling your Falcons pretty well short, and that goes into my next breakout star, Michael Penix Jr. I really think that with Kyle Pitts, who's also not going to be one of my breakout stars. He's not my breakout star, but I do think he takes a step up, and instead of having 1 catch per game, he has 2 catches per game.
Oh my goodness. But finally living up to the 4th overall pick.
All jokes aside, I really do think that what the Falcons have put together, with Michael Penix. It's going to be, I think you'll really see him step up and step into his role as at the head of the helm. It's sad to see Kirk Cousins kind of drift off into, getting basically avoid, and very similar to how he got like this, what he did to RG3 is now happening to basically him. Um, Except for the fact that the Falcons drafted Kirk, Penix to replace Kirk, and nobody really expected that. So, any case, sad to see that happen for Kirk. But Michael Penix Jr., I really do think that he's going to take a step up. He showed flashes, and I feel like there's a lot of encouragement based off the small sample size that we've seen off of him. And I think that the Falcons offense have a lot of weapons in place to really help Penix take the next step and really show and have a great sophomore campaign.
Yeah, I'm always a little more cautious with first year full season starting quarterbacks. I know he did get some time towards the end of last year where, as you mentioned, he did show some positive signs that he could potentially be the QB of the future. Also, just not to pump myself up too much, pump my ego too much, but I was one of the people who was more cautious about that Michael Penix selection, where a lot of people were quick to say, what are the Falcons doing? This is such a dumb move. Why would they do that? And I was of the mindset of, well, when are the Falcons going to be in a position where they can get a quarterback of this caliber of a prospect in the future? In theory, Kirk Cousins was supposed to take the Falcons to a level where they'd consistently be picking in the 20s. And as we all know, yes, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts are exceptions. You're not going to really find a high-end QB prospect in that range, and you're going to have to wind up trading multiple first-round picks, as we saw with the 49ers when they went and traded up for Trey Lance to even get into the position of getting a high-caliber QB prospect. So I was one of the people who understood the Michael Penix pickup and pick before this whole conundrum happened of last year. I do think that he is going to be the starter. I do think that he does flash a lot of good potential. And as you mentioned, Davian, you hit the nail on the head. Bijan Robinson as just a guy who can handle a bulk load of the carries, who can also just be a really safe security blanket as well if you need a check down guy. And then Drake London, too, also a really solid wide receiver, has really come into his own the past couple of years. Darnell Mooney also had a really, really good year last year, really underrated, and really broke out last year. It was actually kind of surprising. I did not expect him to be as good as he was. Then you have a couple other wide receivers who are more iffy guys, but overall, you do have a lot of solid players. Yes, you lose Drew Dahlman on the offensive line to the Bears, but I see no reason why Michael Penix can't take that next step. Personally, I see the Falcons more as a 9-8 type of team. I still think the Buccaneers are going to be in that 10-7, 11-6 range, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Penix had a really good year this upcoming season, and then also was able to parlay that into making the playoffs with the Atlanta Falcons. So that's not a bad prediction at all. You're definitely more along the lines of I want to hype up my own players. I'm always on the mindset of I don't want to hype up my guys too much because I try to eliminate the bias, but it's good to have some homerism and really back your guys. So I appreciate you being the guy who's going to hype up Michael Penix on this podcast, and that's at least something positive. Moving over to another guy, Terrion Arnold, Lions corner. He tweaked his hamstring, I believe it was a week or two ago at this point. But anyways, I still expect him to be fine. Hamstring injuries are always very finicky, but it seems like overall it's nothing too serious. I remember when LaShawn McCoy had a hamstring injury years ago, and that was really rough. He was constantly in and out and dealing with carries issues. It's not a fun injury to deal with just because it keeps lingering. But I think this year he can cement himself as a solid CB2. He had a lot of defensive pass interference issues to start last year in his rookie season, but only had one defensive pass interference called on him after week 10. And overall, this shows that he was doing a better job at playing against these wide receivers without taking penalties, which I think is a good learning development for any young corner. You're likely going to be taking a lot of penalties at first. Then it's just a matter of, okay, but now can you limit these penalties? Can you make that adjustment then and cover wide receivers at a better level? He also overall last year only allowed a 61.2% reception rate when targeted, which is a top 25 mark among the 73 qualifying quarterbacks in that stat last year. So overall, showed some good flashes. Again, similar to Kalijah Kancey, showed some good second half development, which in my mind could potentially be parlayed into a really solid this upcoming season with the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Lions as a whole are going to really have a big step up, and I think that I do think that their defense is, as a whole, as a unit, is going to see great improvement. So I agree with that assessment. I think that you will see a jump from there. I think on the defensive side of the ball, I think another player that you'll see really break out is Derek Hall, edge on the Seahawks. I think that the Seahawks have, with a new coaching staff, he had a very disappointing rookie season, only 11 pressures on 134 chances. I think he's looked better in the preseason, looked more polished in training camp videos and everything. And I think that he's going to be able to take a big step up with a different coaching staff and with a defensive playbook that I think will help benefit him. And you really just have a good sophomore campaign. I think that we always try to root for these rookies heading into their sophomore campaign and hopefully seeing something really good from them. And I'm really hoping that we see something from all of these players across the board, but especially somebody like Derek Hall on the Seahawks. I think you'll really see a big jump and a big improvement.
It really does feel like the Seahawks have really started to invest in that defense more and more, as we've seen over the past 2 years, especially with the draft. And it seems like they're trying to get closer and closer to recreating the leadership boom, which is very scary to other NFL teams. But the Seahawks continue to take a couple more steps. Obviously, they traded Geno Smith last season. Jalen Milroe could potentially be the starter. That'll be interesting to see. But we'll see what winds up happening with the Seattle Seahawks this upcoming year. They might be more of a team that's stuck in the middle, but anything could really happen with them. They brought in Cooper Kupp last year, so this team is certainly not going to be a team that wins less than 6 games, at least in my mind. I think they'll probably be at least in the mid-range with the potential of being a little bit better than that. My final guy that I think is a breakout candidate, and for me it's hard to really call this guy a breakout candidate just because I feel like breakout candidates are players who have already played a year in the NFL, and then it's like, okay, they had a solid season the year prior, but they've shown a lot of flash, and they can really take that lead this upcoming season. This guy is a rookie, and Ashton Jeanty. I really like Ashton Jeanty a lot, and typically I'm pretty low on rookie running backs. I was high on Bijan Robinson. Now, part of that was just being a Falcons fan and wanting him to succeed, but you saw the tape at Texas. You knew that the guy was going to be really, really good when he got to the NFL. And Ashton Jeanty, not the exact same makeup as what Bijan Robinson does, but I still think that he's going to be a really, really big contributor for the Raiders. The Raiders really needed an elite running back since Josh Jacobs left them 2 seasons ago. Zamir White, fantasy owners, including myself, I don't want to talk about Zamir White. I may or may not have taken him in the 5th round, believing the hype, and that burned me as I dropped him by week 6, I believe. But I think Jeanty can be that and way, way more. I think that Jeanty is going to be a really big key component of the Raiders' offense this season. You have Geno Smith, who I think is a solid quarterback. He's not going to be a guy who's going to take you to the playoffs, but he's not going to be a guy that completely sinks your season. So I think that you have a decent quarterback play. The offensive line is going to continue to take steps, as it's a pretty young offensive line with some players who have flashed some good potential as well, could potentially take that next step. And I think Jeanty will certainly cement himself this upcoming season as a top 10 running back, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that Jeanty, I saw it preseason and people are like, oh, well, you didn't do that well in the preseason game. I'm like, come on, guys, it's preseason. Like, stop. You're in a Pete Carroll offense with your QB1 being Geno Smith. Of course he's going to have a breakout season. Everything is set up for this offense to be ran through Jeanty. And I really can't wait. He's such a fun player to watch. Such a great personality. And one other player my final player of who I think is going to break out is someone who we really couldn't get to see because of injury. And so we don't know what he's going to bring to the table. But J.J. McCarthy, quarterback in the Vikings. I think that the Vikings are very well put together still. I think that they have a great offensive core. And we saw success with Sam Darnold at the helm. I think J.J. McCarthy is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold on many aspects of the field. And I really do think that we'll see J.J. McCarthy really step into his role as QB1 very, very well, because he's had 2 years to basically get accustomed with the players and really get accustomed to the system And I think he's really answering it with a different mindset and an underdog mindset that everyone's writing him off. And I truly, truly think that we're going to see a great season out of J.J. McCarthy.
I think it's a good thing, too, in hindsight. Obviously, getting injured and missing the entire season is certainly...
Nobody wants that.
Can hurt your development. But the other thing, too, and Davian, correct me if I'm wrong as I fact-check myself in real time, I'm pretty sure J.J. McCarthy turned 22 in January.
He's very young.
This isn't a 23, 24-year-old quarterback. Like, if Michael Penix Jr., for example, missed all of last year due to injury, and he was the projected star for the Falcons, then you'd be a little concerned because that's a critical year in a player's development. J.J. McCarthy is 22 years old going into the season. He missed his year 21 season, and I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing that he missed that year. Sam Darnold stepped up, played really well for the Vikings, and then got paid for it, going to Seattle. And J.J. McCarthy taking a year, learning the offense more. Yes, you didn't get those good reps and practice that you would have liked to have seen out of a really young quarterback of his age, but he was able to still learn a lot, see how things work, to build chemistry with players off the field, and I completely agree. I think J.J. McCarthy is certainly a player that a lot of people are going to view quite highly of because, again, your logic is quite sound. The Vikings did really well this past season, made the playoffs. They did lose in the wild card after also losing Week 17 to lose the division to the Lions with Sam Darnold. But again, they made the playoffs with Sam Darnold. So in theory, you put two and two together. If J.J. McCarthy is better than Sam Darnold, in theory, the Vikings should be better than they were last year. Now, obviously, some players come in, some players come out, so it's not the exact same team. Obviously, there's different changes with coaches, etc., this, that. But J.J. McCarthy certainly is a player that I think could certainly take a really positive step this upcoming season. And I think he's set up in a really good situation with the Minnesota Vikings. So I completely agree with that pick as well. And I think that's a good place to wrap for this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. For those listening, be sure to comment who you guys think is a potential breakout candidate. Do you agree with some of our picks? Do you not agree? Are there any players that we didn't talk about that you guys think are really going to show out this upcoming season? We'd love to hear in the comments below. And as always, we hope you enjoy this edition of Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. Enjoy the NFL preseason. NFL regular season is closer and closer away, so that's going to be great. We'll be doing our predictions for that in the upcoming weeks. And yeah, for Davian, for Raffi, we hope you enjoyed this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. Have a good one, and we'll see you on the next one. See ya.
Peace.